In the Second World War, Germany lost and Britain won, with a little help from her friends. 40 years ago, though, the result was by no means certain. In fact, it was positively uncertain. So much in doubt that Britain set up the most sophisticated resistance network in the whole of Europe, in case the Nazis decided to cross the Channel and invade. The resistance movement was to be an underground army, literally. And 40 years on, it's still possible to find their hideouts if you know where to look. This one's in Kent, in the middle of Romney Marsh, one of a chain of secret hideouts that stretched north through the Medway towns as far as Yorkshire and Scotland, and west through Sussex and on to Hampshire and Dorset. The units, each of between 6 and 12 men, were concentrated in the coastal areas. Supposedly, they belonged to Home Guard battalions, 201 south of the Thames, 202 north of the Thames, and 203 in Scotland. The battalions didn't in fact exist. The men were to hide until the invading forces had passed, then emerge and harass his supply lines. This top-secret memorandum from the War Cabinet to Winston Churchill in August 1940 directed them to attack tanks and lorries, ammunition dumps, small enemy posts and stragglers. Their activities will also include sniping and intelligence work. The men who were chosen were selected in conditions of the utmost secrecy. This is a rare photograph of one of the Hampshire units. They were given priorities at a time when weapons were scarce, plus a license to kill.
If you've got a job to do, and this is obviously part of the war effort, just as somebody flying a bomber, you've got to accept that your life is at risk, and if you're to achieve your objective, you might have to kill to do it. Under those circumstances, I was completely satisfied that what I was doing was right and reasonable.
When war was declared in September 1939, Jack French was farming at Kingston near Canterbury in Kent. He still is. He was one of the first to be recruited into the auxiliary units. He was 26 years old.
Well, I was involved in the local Home Guard here, and one day Major McNichol turned up and said, would I like to do something with a bit more action in it? We were just guarding the waterworks, and I said, yes, lead me to it.
Tom Miller was also farming at Eastry near Dover.
McNichol said, oh, that's grand. He said, well, you're the sort of chap we want. And he brought out a piece of paper out of his pocket. It was the Official Secrets Act. Now, he said, if you'll sign this, we'll tell you what it's all about.
Isle of Wight farmer Tom Cowley and his wife Anna also received a visit from an intelligence officer.
Firstly, he said it was very, very secret. Secondly, he said it was very, very tough. That's why I'm asking you. And thirdly, he wanted somebody like me that knew the terrain.
Mary Shaw was a driver in the Fannies, the first aid nursing yeomanry.
Two friends who were in the Fannies with me suddenly disappeared, and two sisters, and nobody knew how to get in touch with them. And then after a few days, well, a few weeks really, I had a letter from one of them saying that the job she was doing was secret, was very interesting, and that it was just the sort of thing that I could do if I liked, but she couldn't tell me what it was because it was so secret.
The new units needed commanders. One of them was Bill Gardner, who was put in charge of the units around Manston Airfield in Kent. They had suitably agricultural code names.
Well, I have one in Herne Bay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 here. And my particular one, that was my favourite one, was called Gherkin.
How did you recruit the men? What sort of men did you look for?
Poachers and farmers, and countrymen, of course.
Did you have poachers in your unit?
We had one, yeah.
Was
yes.
he any good?
Super fellow, yes. And he was also our local publican. so he... Great fellow.
You might have been having away some of your pheasants.
Oh, no doubt, I knew, and he knew I knew too.
Did you have a specific task as a group of units?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. If Jerry got in here, which he was going to do, our task was get in here, and when he was going to load this place up with aeroplanes and bombs and God knows what to go inland, our task was to get in through the barbed wire something and blow the bloody lot up before he could get anywhere. We had every explosive that was ever given to anybody.
What do you mean?
Well, everything. Gel ignite. Oh, every explosive you could think of, we had tons.
How did you transport it about?
I used to come through here in full evening dress with the birds in the back of my car, with a pass which said I could do anything. And the back of my car was full of explosives.
A radio network was set up by women soldiers nicknamed Secret Sweeties. Mary Shaw was summoned to Harrods to be interviewed.
So I took myself to Harrods Lounge and looked about, and there was a woman officer with red hair and a kilt talking to a girl that I didn't know in a corner, animated conversation going on. So I modestly walked to the other end of the room and sat down with my back half turned so as not to appear to be staring at them. Though I was, of course, out of the corner of my eye, watching lynx-eyed what went on. And when the girl got up and walked away, I watched even more stealthily until a signal was made to me, and I then approached the officer in the kilt with the red hair and didn't know whether, as we were indoors, whether I should greet her with salutes or clicked heels, but thought this, in Harrods Lounge, this wasn't really very appropriate.
Well, besides, you hadn't been introduced.
And we hadn't been introduced. So that was the start of my getting involved with auxiliary unit signals.
Headquarters was at Coles Hill in Berkshire, burned down shortly after the war. But the units regularly trained at isolated regional centres, such as this house near the Ashford-Canterbury Road. Then it was known as the Garth. So intense was the secrecy that the men's identities were never revealed even to their comrades in arms. The less you knew, the less you could reveal under interrogation.
It was a game, a grim game, but it was a game one enjoyed playing.
I never found that I was the right shape to fire a rifle.
It knocked you down, did it?
Well, the kick was much more than I expected. I think I could have wounded an assailant, but I doubt if I could have got him in the heart. I might have got him in the knee.
An intense rivalry developed between the units.
What did you think of the Kent units? Did you get on with them?
Not really, because we thought they didn't fight fair, which was fair enough, I suppose, if we'd been Germans or something. But they did dirty little things so that they won all the competition. For some reason or other, you know, in the night before sort of thing.
They prepare too well.
Yes, they'd come in and steal your revolver, and somebody's boot was missing in the middle of the night, and all that rubbish.
Not very British.
No, we didn't think so anyway. But of course we did 2 or 3 of those, and we got rather, we got to know what swines they were, and in the nicest possible way.
By now, the Kent units thought the invasion was inevitable. They decided to practice their newly acquired skills against the regular army, who, by 1940, were garrisoned in the southeast in their thousands. Besides, they reasoned, it would keep the troops on their toes. One night, Jack French's unit chose as their target a huge naval gun, which was to be used to shell the enemy as he crossed the channel. The gun was hidden in this railway tunnel.
Well, if you can imagine a foggy night in November with no wind, no sound at all. And just above this tunnel, the gun crew lived in their Nissen huts. And you could hear the guards moving about round the tunnel. We thought that there'd probably be a change of guard at about 10 o'clock, and after about a half an hour, we were proved right. We came down, in fact, down that very footpath there. Well, once we got into the tunnel, we had the great job, was pitch black, of identifying where the gun was and climbing up onto it to the various parts which we decided to attack and stick out pieces of plasticine which represented charges.
How big was the gun?
Well, it was an 18-inch ex-naval gun from the First World War on a railway mounting, and it weighed 250, 300 tons. And I suppose that overall the gun plus carriage must have been 150 foot long. It's a huge thing. And it reached right up to the top of the tunnel within about a couple of feet of the roof. And I was up there. And unfortunately, we were surprised. The guard called out his colleagues, and I'm afraid one or two of our number got rather duffed up.
What do you mean, duffed up?
Well, one of them was in hospital for a couple of days with suspected cracked ribs, but nothing worse than that, I'm pleased to say.
You could have got shot.
Oh, yes. No question about that. And I'm delighted to think that they carried out a further investigation before they actually drew aim.
For some men, to join the auxiliaries, as they were known, was like having all their birthdays at once. Tom Miller had always been, as he puts it, interested in explosives. What do you mean, that you were interested in explosives? Did you go around blowing up things anyway?
Well, I had been, yes. When I first came here, I hadn't been on this farm very long then. There were a lot of enormous great trees. I could cut the trees down, but getting these old trees stumped up from the days before bulldozers, it was a heck of a job getting those stumps up, but I found that by blowing them up with gelignite, by making a hole under the stump and setting off a charge of gelignite, lifted the stump up, and...
Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy the bang?
Oh, I found it very interesting. Yes, I enjoyed doing that sort of thing. It's a form of fireworks, I suppose, really. You know, they say fireworks is one of the most primitive forms of entertainment, so I suppose it was a primitive, sort of a primitive enjoyment I got. That's a little incendiary device. It's just like a match. You can strike it on a match, and it's filled with kerosene or paraffin or something of the sort, and you can use that to set fire to anything inflammable. I don't know whether it would set fire to a petrol dump, although it would be very handy to put with a petrol dump so that if you burst the cans with an explosive charge, this thing would be flaming away and it would set fire, make quite sure it all caught fire. Mm-hmm. That was there, that was the...
That's still full, is it?
What?
That's still full.
Yes, I think it is, yes. I never found a use for it. Occasionally, I did have some of these. I used to use them for burning prunings. They were quite handy for that, burning tree pruning.
What's that?
Well, that's a lump of explosive, or it's equivalent to a lump of explosive anyhow. That's about a 4-ounce stick of gelignite.
It's plastic explosive, is it?
It is plastic explosive, yes, that's right.
So I should put that down rather carefully.
Well, it's fairly safe. This is a sort of thing that we used to use, a thunder flash attached to one of these pull switches. The only way to see if it's live is to pull the safety pin out, and you see you attached it to a post or whatever you wanted to blow up, or we attach it to a rose bush if you like. Whether it would work after all these years, I don't know. We try it if you like. Oh, well.
Towards the end of 1940, thousands of British troops were fighting and dying. The men in the auxiliaries trained on in secret. So secretly that some neighbours felt the men were avoiding the real war. The Cowleys received a white feather for cowardice.
It just came through the post in an envelope.
Who opened the envelope?
Well, I really can't remember. I think we used...
You used to open my post in those days.
I think we've always opened one another's post, actually. So I really don't know who opened it, but obviously we both knew. And,
That must have been very upsetting.
Well, yes.
Did you feel, Mr. Cowley, at that time, when the white feather arrived, that you wanted to say to them, but look, I am doing my bit. Not only am I a farmer, and therefore I can't go to war, but I'm also involved in this highly secret activity?
Yeah.
No, you know, quite frankly, I was above that sort of thing. I was farming very, very hard. I lost all my staff. I had 3 land girls that one up had never seen a cow before until she came as to be a help in the cow stable. Now I ask you, I was doing my bit feeding people, I reckon. To hell with anything else.
The underground bases from which they would fight were compact and elaborately concealed. This one was built beneath an old brickworks at Lyddon near Dover. It had a main shaft and an escape tunnel which came out in an ash pit. The entrance to this one was concealed beneath an old cart in a farmyard. It was lifted by counterweights. At another, you had to drop a marble down a pipe into a tin to alert the men already inside. They then let you in. And this base was a hole within a hole, concealed beneath a crater in the wood above the garth. It held 120 men and was to be a rallying point for the auxiliaries if they were on the run. But where was Tom Cowley's hideout?
I don't know whether I can tell you.
You've never told me.
No.
You've always said that that's one of the things
I would just tell you that
mustn't
it
tell.
was in a vast wood, a copse. Not a forest, but a vast wood that we had.
We could have ways of making you tell me.
We failed to make Tom Cowley talk, but a man from the Romney Marsh Patrol was more forthcoming. Dick Body spent many nights incarcerated beneath this pea field.
Now, exactly what was down here? I mean, is it rather as it was in those days 40 years ago?
This is basically the same as it was. The bunks back here, sleeping bunks for 6, leaving the 7th man on the alert all the time. In the middle here was a table. Each side were a set of lockers. Over in the corner, a water tank holding 50 gallons of water. And back in the other corner there, an Elson closet. We have a pressure oil lamp in here and also a pressure cooker.
Enough food for how long?
14 days rations. After 14 days, we were told everybody to do what they think fit.
What was the name of your patrol?
Our patrol was Mushroom.
How many other patrols in your group?
4 patrols altogether.
Cool.
Mushroom, Truffle, Toadstool and Fungus.
Oh, we were Swedes.
What was the name of the other?
Well, I think it was a mangel wurzel and a turnip and 1 or 2 others. They were all vegetables because we were farming chaps, and if we talked about Swedes and turnips and so on, it would all look fairly reasonable.
The unit's manuals were camouflaged as well, as a fertilizer catalogue or a 3-year-old calendar. But inside was graphic advice on how to destroy, maim and kill, methods used today by terrorists or freedom fighters, dependent on your point of view.
You were trained to kill.
Oh, yeah.
You were trained in detail to kill.
Yeah,
You were trained to kill silently.
quite.
How?
2 hands, a knife.
Did that worry you at all?
No, I don't think so. No. I was, what, 24? And if people came to take my farm, my wife, what have you, I think it was up to me to do what I could to keep them out of it.
This way, in the back, that was the way we were taught to kill. When you came in here, you crawled in round here, you see, and you saw a Jerry sentry, and you knew what you were supposed to do, and you knifed him up the back. That was that.
Did that worry you at all?
Well, we never did it, so I don't know. I don't know. I honestly can't say.
Killing people was incidental. If there was a sentry guarding the dump, as almost certainly would be, it might be necessary to kill the sentry before you were able to get to the dump.
Circumstances, you see, were so different in those war years. I mean, when I think back to my mother in her late 60s, learning how to make a Molotov cocktail to hold a tank should it come through the village, there seemed to be nothing extraordinary that I should learn how to abolish a German if he came to attack me.
If the Germans had invaded, they had plans, revealed after the war, to imprison or shoot any civilians concealing firearms or explosives. The curfew would be strict. Public meetings would be forbidden. When they had joined the auxiliaries, the men and women knew that if they were caught, they would be shot as spies. They would be operating, after all, behind the enemy lines. They also realized that even if their campaign lasted only a matter of weeks, they risked the Germans taking reprisals against their families.
Well, I was actually married during that period.
Did you discuss this with your wife?
Oh, yes, indeed. And she was absolutely for it, too.
You knew, though, in your heart of hearts, that your activities might have led to her being killed as a hostage?
Yes, although we felt that the precautions that we'd taken would have made the connection between me and her not so clear as it would have otherwise been.
What do you mean?
Well, first of all, we didn't intend to be taken prisoner. We were going to fight it out. And we felt that quite probably, with the sort of equipment that we were carrying, there would probably be great difficulty in finding the shreds of the body to decide who the devil it was.
Your body?
Mine.
I thought we worked it out pretty well. As soon as the Germans landed and I was going to disappear, we'd made arrangements for my wife to join her mother in Freshwater, where she would be one amongst quite a few hundred women. Whereas if she'd have been on her own in a great farmhouse, she'd have probably come to much more harm than she would with a herd of women.
Do you think that you would have been effective?
I think we'd have done a lot of harm to them. I'm pretty certain we would.
How long do you think, realistically, that you were going to last?
We were told we wouldn't last very long.
I don't think anybody had any idea at all. We just survived as long as you could. And if our efforts were sufficiently successful and we did upset the German invasion plans, as we hoped we would, well, possibly the British would drive them all back into the sea again.
I'd be bloody lucky if we did survive. Really, I mean, we'd have been very lucky. Because Jerry's weren't fools, were they? They'd have found us somewhere. And then we got to get out of it, of course. Perhaps we would have done. Perhaps we wouldn't.
We might have been unlucky, we might have been wiped out on our first effort. But my own feeling is that we're pretty light on our feet. They'd have had a struggle to find us.
But Britain's resistance movement was never put to the test. For the Germans never came.
Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday, the 8th of May. But in the interest of saving lives, the ceasefire began yesterday to be sounded along all the fronts. The German war is therefore at an end.
40 years on now, and only now are we piecing this story together. What were those days for you?
I lived as fully as I've ever lived. To me, it was something worth doing, worth training for, with the most splendid people.
There was no joke about it. It's bloody serious. It really was bloody serious. In fact, it was bloody frightening. 100%, I was frightened. Nobody could say they weren't frightened to win a job like that. They're liars if they said they weren't frightened, weren't they? Any soldier that went across over the trenches was frightened when he went over the trenches.
It satisfied my desire to be involved in the war effort at a time when it looked as if it was all hands to the pump.
Have you kept in touch?
Oh, yes. Quite frankly, they're the sort of chaps who, before the war, I might have gone shooting with. I've been shooting with them since. Been sailing together. We played rugger together. They're the sort of people who, in this part of the world, keep the wheels turning.
So, in October 1945, the auxiliary units stood down, and each man received a letter. It was due to you that more divisions left the country to fight the Battle of France. In view of the fact that your lives depended on secrecy, no public recognition will be possible, but your skill and determination will not be forgotten. What had begun in secrecy ended in secrecy. They called Kent the frontline county, which is why the auxiliary units were born here. After all, the enemy were only 22 miles away, across there. But all that was 40 years ago, relevant now only to historians as they forage, or to a group of elderly men who until now have loyally kept their secrets. After all, the need will never arise again, will it?